Today we are breaking down a fast-moving and extremely serious situation in the Middle East, where protests inside Iran, rising regional tensions, and direct warnings to neighboring countries are now colliding with the presence of U.S. military forces in the Gulf. Reports that U.S. forces were told to leave a base in Qatar, combined with Iran warning its neighbors of possible strikes on U.S. targets, have sent shockwaves through diplomatic, military, and economic circles around the world. To understand why this moment matters so much, we need to look at what is happening inside Iran itself. Over recent weeks, Iran has faced widespread protests driven by a mix of economic hardship, political frustration, and public anger toward the leadership. These protests are not limited to one city or one social group. They stretch across urban centers and smaller towns, involving students, workers, and ordinary families who feel squeezed by inflation, unemployment, and years of international sanctions. For the Iranian government, internal unrest is always a red-line issue. The leadership in Tehran sees domestic stability as essential to national survival. When protests grow larger or last longer than expected, the authorities often frame them not just as internal dissent, but as part of a foreign-backed effort to weaken Iran. This narrative has been used repeatedly over the years, especially when protests coincide with rising tensions with the United States. As demonstrations intensified, Iranian officials began issuing sharper warnings abroad. The message coming out of Tehran was clear and deliberate. If Iran feels directly threatened by U.S. actions, or if U.S. forces are used to pressure or attack Iran, then American military assets in the region could become targets. This is not new rhetoric, but the timing and tone have made it far more alarming. One of the most striking developments was the report that U.S. forces were told to leave a base in Qatar. Qatar hosts one of the most important U.S. military facilities in the Middle East. It plays a central role in command, logistics, and air operations across the region. Any suggestion that American personnel are being repositioned, reduced, or moved away from such a base immediately raises questions about the seriousness of the threat environment. From Iran's perspective, U.S. bases across the Gulf are seen as part of a network surrounding the country. These installations exist in Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and beyond. Iranian military planners have long stated that in the event of a conflict, these bases would be considered legitimate targets. By warning neighboring states, Iran is signaling that hosting U.S. forces carries risks if tensions escalate further. For Gulf countries, this puts them in an extremely difficult position. On one hand, they rely heavily on U.S. military protection for their security, particularly against regional threats. On the other hand, they do not want to become direct battlegrounds in a U.S.-Iran confrontation. Many of these governments have spent years trying to balance their relationships, maintaining security ties with Washington while also keeping diplomatic channels open with Tehran. Qatar, in particular, has often played the role of mediator in regional conflicts. It maintains working relationships with Iran, hosts U.S. forces, and positions itself as a diplomatic bridge rather than a frontline state. Reports that U.S. forces were told to leave a base there suggest that even traditionally neutral or balancing actors are now feeling the pressure of rising tensions. The U.S. response to this situation has been cautious but firm. American officials have emphasized that U.S. forces in the region are there for defensive purposes and to protect allies. At the same time, Washington has warned Iran against attacking U.S. personnel or facilities, making it clear that any such move would trigger a strong response. This kind of language is meant to deter Iran, but it also raises the stakes. Inside Iran, the leadership faces a strategic dilemma. Cracking down hard on protests risks fueling more anger and international condemnation. But appearing weak at home or abroad could embolden both domestic critics and foreign adversaries. By escalating rhetoric against the U.S. and its regional presence, Tehran may be trying to shift the focus outward, framing internal unrest as part of a larger struggle against external enemies. This strategy has been used before. When pressure builds internally, external confrontation can rally nationalist sentiment and justify tighter security measures. However, it is a dangerous game. Miscalculations can lead to real military clashes, even if neither side initially wants a full-scale war. For the United States, the challenge is equally complex. Washington must protect its forces and allies without being drawn into a conflict that could spiral out of control. The Middle East is already dealing with multiple crises, from ongoing conflicts to fragile political transitions. A direct US-Iran military confrontation would send shockwaves far beyond the region. One major concern is the risk of misinterpretation. Military movements, troop repositioning, or heightened alerts can be seen as preparations for attack, even if they are defensive. When both sides are on edge, small incidents can escalate quickly. A drone incident, a missile test, or a clash involving proxy forces could trigger a chain reaction that is hard to stop. Iran's warning to its neighbors is also a form of psychological pressure. By making Gulf states feel vulnerable, Tehran may be hoping they will push Washington to de-escalate or reduce its military footprint. This approach aims to exploit the fear of regional governments that do not want to see their cities, infrastructure, and energy facilities become targets. Energy markets are watching this situation closely. The Gulf region is critical to global oil and gas supplies. Even the hint of conflict can cause prices to spike, affecting economies far beyond the Middle East. Shipping routes, particularly through strategic waterways, could be disrupted if tensions turn into open conflict. Protests inside Iran add another unpredictable layer. If unrest continues or spreads, the leadership may feel increasingly cornered. History shows that regimes under pressure sometimes take bold or risky actions abroad to reassert control and deterrence. At the same time, prolonged instability could limit Iran's ability to sustain a confrontation, making its threats more about deterrence than intent. Regional powers are also calculating their moves. Countries like Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates have experienced direct attacks in the past and understand the risks of escalation. They are likely engaging in intense diplomatic efforts behind the scenes to prevent the situation from boiling over, even as they maintain their security partnerships. Israel is another key factor. It has long viewed Iran as a major threat and has carried out actions aimed at limiting Iran's military capabilities. Any major US-Iran confrontation could draw Israel in, further widening the conflict. This possibility adds urgency to efforts to keep tensions from escalating. The role of international diplomacy cannot be ignored. European countries, along with other global powers, are likely urging restraint on all sides. Diplomatic channels, even if strained, remain crucial for preventing misunderstandings and exploring off-ramps from escalation. Quiet negotiations often happen away from the headlines, even when public rhetoric is harsh. At the heart of this crisis is a deep lack of trust. Years of sanctions, proxy conflicts, and confrontational policies have left the US and Iran with little confidence in each other's intentions. Every move is viewed through a lens of suspicion. This makes de-escalation far more difficult, even when both sides might prefer to avoid war. The situation in Qatar highlights how interconnected these tensions have become. A decision about troop positioning is no longer just a logistical matter. It carries political, strategic, and symbolic weight. It sends messages to allies, adversaries, and domestic audiences all at once. For ordinary people in the region, this is a moment of anxiety. They have seen how quickly tensions can turn into conflict, and they know that civilians often pay the highest price. Protests, military warnings, and diplomatic standoffs are not abstract concepts for those living near potential flashpoints. As events continue to unfold, much will depend on communication, restraint, and careful calculation. A single statement, action, or misstep could change the trajectory of this crisis. At the same time, sustained diplomatic engagement could still reduce tensions and prevent the worst-case scenarios. In the coming days and weeks, we are likely to see more statements from Iranian officials, responses from the US, and reactions from regional governments. Each of these will need to be analyzed not just for what is said, but for what it signals beneath the surface. This moment is a reminder of how fragile stability can be in the Middle East, and how domestic unrest in one country can ripple outward, affecting regional and global security. The combination of internal protests and external confrontation creates a volatile mix that demands careful handling from all sides. For now, the world is watching closely, waiting to see whether this crisis moves toward de-escalation or drifts closer to confrontation. The decisions made behind closed doors, as much as the statements made in public, will shape what happens next. As always, staying informed and understanding the deeper context is essential. These are not isolated events, but part of a long and complex history of tensions, alliances, and rivalries that continue to define the region. We will continue to follow this story closely and break down every major development as it happens. Stay with us for clear, in-depth explanations as this situation evolves. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel.